The late afternoon sun burned gold over the dusty auction yard of Dry Hollow, Texas. Boots thudded against the ground as a crowd of ranchers, locals, and traders gathered around the wooden corral. It was the final lot of the day, and most were already halfway through their beers, talking loud and laughing louder. Then came Lot 47, a chestnut horse with a dull coat, sunken flanks, and a quiet fire in his eyes. He stepped into the pen slowly, ribs visible beneath his skin, ears alert, yet somehow calm. The energy shifted. Among the crowd stood Beau Whitaker, a tall man in his early 60s, lean and hardened by decades of ranch life. He said nothing, only stared. His hands gripped the railing tight, knuckles pale. By his side stood his daughter, Emery Vaughn, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the animal. Though she'd lived in Austin for years, she came home often, drawn by the land, and by her father's silence, which had deepened since her mother died. "He's not just another throwaway," Emery said quietly. A few feet away, Dixie Malone, the fast-talking auctioneer in a faded hat, raised his gavel. "All right, folks, last one of the day. A little rough around the edges, but he's got legs under him. Who'll start the bid at 100? Grayson Holt, local rancher and longtime rival of Beau, shouted, "I'll give you 50 and a bucket of oats." Laughter broke out around the ring. Maverick Torres and Cruz Ramirez slapped the rails, howling. Even Camila Estrada, the town's new vet, smirked softly from behind the gate. Beau didn't move, but his jaw tightened. His eyes stayed on the horse, unblinking. The animal looked back at him. Not afraid. Not wild. Just waiting. Beau took a slow breath and said, loud enough for all to hear, 150. The laughter stopped. Grayson turned his head sharply. "You serious, Whitaker? For that?" Dixie blinked in surprise, then shrugged. "All right then. 150 going once. Anyone got 175? Silence. Going twice." Emery's heart pounded. The horse hadn't flinched. He stood still, watching Beau as if recognizing something. Someone. Dixie's gavel slammed down. "Sold. Lot 47 to Beau Whitaker." A murmur swept through the crowd. Some shook their heads. Others smirked. But when Beau stepped into the ring, everything went quiet again. The horse didn't back away. Instead, he stepped forward. One step, then another. Beau raised his hand, and the animal leaned in. Emery stepped closer, her breath catching. Beneath the horse's tangled mane, just above the left eye, was a small, crescent-shaped scar. Her voice trembled. "Dad, that mark. It looks like..." Beau's hand dropped. His eyes went wide. The color drained from his face. No, it couldn't be. But deep down he knew it was him. The old barn on Beau Whitaker's land hadn't seen life in years. The wooden boards groaned beneath his boots as he led the horse inside. Dust hung in the air like a ghost, and the light filtering through the cracks painted stripes across the walls. Emery followed close behind, silent, her eyes still locked on the scar above the horse's eye. Neither of them spoke for a long while. There was a weight between them now, something unspoken but heavy. Beau began brushing the horse's coat slowly, each stroke revealing more of what time had hidden. Emery broke the silence first. "You think it's him, don't you?" Her voice was soft but steady. Beau didn't answer right away. His hands moved across the horse's back, slow and deliberate. Finally, he exhaled through his nose and said, "That scar. I remember it. I remember the colt that had it." He stopped brushing. "His name was Red." Emery blinked. "I've never heard you mention a red." Beau nodded slowly. "You wouldn't have. He disappeared the same night. Ben did." The words fell like lead. Ben, Emery's older brother. Gone without a trace 20 years ago. A memory buried deep beneath years of grief and silence. Emery stepped back, shaken. "You think this horse is the same one from that night?" Beau didn't reply. He just looked at the animal, who now stood calmly, eyes closed as if comforted by the familiarity of Beau's presence. The coincidence was too sharp, too specific. The scar was exactly where it had always been, in the shape of a crescent moon, like something out of a bad dream. But dreams didn't come back in the flesh. Back at the house, Beau sat alone on the porch while Emery made tea in the kitchen. The horse, now resting in the barn, was all he could think about. His mind was a storm of fragments. Ben's last words, the argument they had, the thunderstorm that rolled in that same night, the sound of hooves in the dark, and the screaming. He had convinced himself long ago that it had all just ended, that some questions didn't have answers. But now one had walked back into his life, wearing a scar like a brand from the past. Meanwhile, down at the local feed store, Jace Calderon leaned over the counter, thumbing through a dusty ledger when Brielle Navarro stepped in, notepad in hand. "You hear about Whitaker's stunt at the auction?" she asked. Jace smirked. "Yeah. Man spends $150 on a skeleton. Gotta be something more to it." She narrowed her eyes. "That's what I'm here to find out." Outside, the wind picked up. Dust rolled across the road. Something buried was starting to rise, and no one in Dry Hollow was ready for what it would bring next. Morning light spilled across the ranch as Beau stood in the barn doorway, coffee in hand, watching the horse, Red, as he moved slowly around the stall. The chestnut's gait was still uneven, favoring his right leg, but he moved with quiet strength. Beau hadn't slept. The scar haunted him. Every time he looked at it, it pulled him straight back to that stormy night 20 years ago, when everything shattered. Red had vanished, and so had Ben. Two losses, tangled together. And now one of them had come home. Inside the house, Emery sat at the kitchen table, flipping through a dusty photo album she hadn't touched in years. Her fingers paused on an old picture. Ben, no older than 16, sitting bareback on a young chestnut colt. His smile wide. The horse's blaze unmistakable. She traced the image in silence, then closed the album and walked back to the barn. "It really is him," she said quietly, watching Red chew slowly on hay. "But if Red's back, then what happened that night wasn't what we thought." Beau didn't look at her. Ben left angry. "We fought. I told him he wasn't ready to train that horse. He thought I was trying to control him." His voice cracked slightly. "He took Red and rode off into the storm. I searched for hours, days. We found nothing." He finally met Emery's eyes. "But if the horse is here, maybe Ben didn't die that night." The words felt dangerous to speak, like they could crack the fragile truth Beau had lived with for 2 decades. Emery stepped closer, her mind spinning. What if someone found Red? What if they took him in? What if Ben? She stopped. Hope and fear warred inside her. Too much time had passed. Too many questions were never asked. The silence in their family had been thick for years, and now, suddenly, everything was unraveling. "We need answers, Dad." Beau nodded, slowly. "And we'll start with where Red's been." Meanwhile, at the sheriff's office, Cruz Ramirez leaned back in his creaking chair, flipping through archived records. He had seen Red at the auction too. He didn't say anything at the time, but the scar. He remembered it from a report long ago. A colt matching that description had been found injured along the riverbank the morning after Ben vanished. No ID, no owner, just unclaimed livestock. The case had been closed. Quietly. Too quietly. And now, Brielle Navarro stood outside his door, tapping her pen against a folded page. "You ready to tell me why a missing horse just came back from the dead?" Cruz sighed, setting the folder on the desk. "Because if Red's back, Ben might be too. And with that, the town's oldest unsolved mystery began to stir. Deeper, darker, and far from finished. Beau stood by the riverbank where the water moved slow and muddy, the same spot he had searched all those years ago. The wind rustled the cottonwood trees, and the sound brought back the distant echo of a younger man's voice, Ben's voice, angry, defiant, and hurt. Emery stood beside him, arms folded tightly, her boots sinking slightly in the wet ground. "This is where they stopped looking," Beau said, almost to himself. Sheriff said the current was strong enough to carry a body for miles. But they never found one. Red had been found here, injured, skittish, and alone, but the sheriff's report made no mention of Ben. No clothing, no blood, no trace. Only the horse. "Someone found him," Emery said. "Someone kept him alive all these years." She looked up at her father. "That means someone knows what happened. Maybe someone didn't want you to find out." The thought hung in the air like fog. Beau had spent years blaming himself. But now it felt like the truth had been buried on purpose. Back at the barn, Camila Estrada examined Red's leg under the dim light. "He's healing well, considering," she told Jace Calderon, who leaned against the post, arms crossed. "He's been through a lot. You can see it in his eyes." Jace nodded. "You think he remembers?" Camila paused, brushing the horse's mane back gently. "I think horses remember more than people give them credit for." Her voice softened. "Especially the painful things." Jace didn't respond, but the look in his eyes said he understood that far too well. Later that evening, Cruz Ramirez drove out to his late uncle's abandoned property on the edge of town. The place had been boarded up for years, ever since old Silvio Ramirez passed. He used to take in strays, dogs, livestock, sometimes even people. Cruz walked around the back and found the small paddock still standing, weeds growing through the slats. A broken halter hung from the fence. A chill crept up his spine. What if Red had been here? What if Silvio had taken him in and never said a word? Meanwhile, Brielle Navarro sat at the town library, eyes scanning the microfilm screen. She froze when she found it, a newspaper clipping from 20 years ago. Local teen missing, family horse also gone. She zoomed in. A grainy photo showed Ben with Red, but next to them was someone else. Half-turned, barely visible, but familiar. She enlarged the image and gasped. "That's Grayson Holt," she whispered. "Why didn't anyone say he was with them?" At the same moment, Beau entered his study and opened an old cigar box. Inside were letters, worn and yellowed. He unfolded one with shaking hands. The handwriting was Ben's. And the final line read, "If something happens to me, don't trust Grayson." The letter trembled in Beau's hands as he read it again under the flickering light of the old desk lamp. The words were unmistakable. Ben's voice echoed through each sentence, conflicted, proud, afraid. The final line hit him like a hammer, "Don't trust Grayson." Beau stared at it for minutes, unable to breathe. He had always assumed the falling out between Ben and Grayson was just youthful pride, two boys growing apart. But this was something darker, something hidden. And if Ben feared him, there had to be a reason. Emery walked in quietly, sensing the storm brewing inside her father. "Is that from Ben?" she asked gently. Beau nodded. "Found it in the box your mother packed away after the search ended. I never opened it until now." He looked up, his eyes glassy. "I don't know why I waited." Emery sat beside him, her hand resting over his. "You weren't ready," she said. "None of us were." They sat in silence, the letter between them. Finally, Beau said, "Grayson was with him that night. He just never told anyone." Across town, in the back of the feed store, Jace Calderon confronted Grayson Holt. "You were there, weren't you?" he asked, voice low. Grayson leaned back in his chair, the corners of his mouth tight. I was just a kid. We were both reckless. Jace's eyes narrowed. He looked up to you, trusted you. And now his horse is back, but he's not. That's not a coincidence. Grayson stood abruptly. I didn't do anything to Ben. His tone wavered, defensive. He left. That's what happened. But even as he said it, he didn't sound convinced. That same night, Brielle Navarro sat across from Cruz Ramirez in the sheriff's office. Why didn't your department ever question Grayson? She asked. Cruz rubbed his temple. Because there was no evidence. Just a missing boy and a horse found 2 days later. Grayson claimed he hadn't seen Ben in days, and no one challenged it. Brielle shook her head. Well, someone should have. She slid the newspaper photo across the desk. He was there. And you all missed it. Cruz stared at the image, a weight settling in his chest. Or ignored it. At the barn, Red stood restless, pacing in his stall. Emery approached, whispering gently to calm him. But the horse was agitated, eyes wide, ears twitching. He pawed the ground, snorted hard, then stopped suddenly, staring out into the dark. Emery followed his gaze, heart thumping. And there, just beyond the fence, stood a shadowed figure watching them, silent and still. Beau stepped outside, flashlight raised, but the figure turned and vanished into the trees. No footprints. No trace. Only one thing was certain. Someone didn't want Red's story told. Morning came with a heavy sky, the kind that made the whole town feel quieter than usual. Beau sat at the kitchen table, Red's saddle in front of him. Old, worn, but still strong. His fingers traced a name etched faintly into the leather beneath the stirrup strap, Ben W. It was a quiet confirmation of something he had already begun to accept but hadn't spoken aloud. His son had planned to leave that night, for good, and he'd taken Red with him. But something had stopped him. Something, or someone. Emery entered the room, holding a dusty folder. I went through Mom's old storage boxes, she said, laying it down. Inside were receipts, maps, and a crumpled, stained page from a ledger. Look at this, she said, pointing to an entry dated 2 days after Ben's disappearance. It was a supply purchase. Feed, bandages, painkillers, paid in cash. This is Grayson's handwriting, she added. Beau stared at the page. He was treating Red. Emery nodded. And hiding him. Meanwhile, at the vet clinic, Camila Estrada flipped through old intake forms left behind by the previous veterinarian. She wasn't looking for anything specific, just following instinct. Then she found it. An unregistered horse, brought in years ago, matching Red's exact description. No owner name. Just the initials GH. Camila's chest tightened. She picked up the phone and called Emery. You were right. Someone kept Red alive. Quietly. Carefully. And they didn't want anyone to know. At the same time, Jace Calderon found himself standing on Grayson's porch again, this time not as a friend, but as a man needing answers. Why'd you lie? He asked, holding up the faded photo Brielle had found. Grayson didn't deny it. He looked older today, tired, like a man carrying weight for too long. Ben trusted me. He told me he was leaving. Said he couldn't take the pressure anymore. I told him to wait, to talk to his dad. But he wouldn't listen. Jace's voice hardened. Then what happened? Grayson's eyes fell. I don't know. He rode off. I never saw him again. Back in town, Brielle Navarro visited an old ranch hand who used to work for Grayson around the time Ben disappeared. His memory was sharp, his hands calloused. When shown the picture of Red, he nodded. That horse was in Grayson's barn for a while. We weren't supposed to talk about it. Brielle leaned in. Did you ever see Ben? The man hesitated. No. But one night, I heard yelling. 2 voices. One of them was crying. That night, as Beau closed the barn doors, a letter slid under the gate. No envelope. No name. Just 4 words, written in shaky ink, "He's not buried yet." The letter sat on the kitchen table like a loaded gun. Beau stared at it for nearly an hour without touching it. "He's not buried yet." The words circled in his head like a storm. Was it a clue? A threat? Or a confession? Emery sat across from him, pale and wide-eyed. "Someone knows what happened to Ben," she whispered. "And they want you to find out." Beau didn't respond. His silence wasn't cold. It was heavy, deliberate. He was thinking like a rancher again. Step by step. Don't spook the herd. Later that afternoon, they took Red out into the field for the first time since the auction. The horse moved slowly but with more strength than before. Emery walked beside him, watching his every step. Beau stayed behind, observing the path they walked. Then, as they passed the north fence line, near the old oak tree, Red stopped dead in his tracks. He snorted, ears perked, and wouldn't move forward. His body stiffened. Emery looked back. "Dad, he's scared." Beau's face darkened. "That's where Ben used to take him to train. Every afternoon." Meanwhile, back at the sheriff's office, Cruz Ramirez reopened the missing person file for Ben Whitaker. Dusty and thin, it was filled with assumptions but lacked hard facts. He scanned the list of people interviewed back then and paused at one name. Marisol Vega, a quiet woman who used to clean Grayson's house. She had left town not long after Ben disappeared. Cruz picked up the phone. "Find her," he told his deputy. "She may know more than anyone realized." At the feed store, Brielle Navarro sat with the old ranch hand again. This time, she brought the letter. His hands trembled slightly as he read it. "That handwriting," he said, narrowing his eyes. "I seen it before. Mr. Silvio used to get notes like that from a guy who brought feed late at night. Said it was for a private barn he kept up north." Brielle leaned in. "What guy?" The man hesitated. "Didn't get a name. But he drove Grayson's old truck." Back at the ranch, as dusk painted the sky in streaks of purple and orange, Beau and Emery returned to the barn. Emery fed Red while Beau paced outside, thinking about the tree line, the scar, the ledger, and now this letter. Something was coming together. Slowly, painfully. But it wasn't over. Not even close. That night, just before midnight, someone knocked once at the barn door. Emery opened it. A woman stood there. Gray hair, tired eyes, trembling hands. "My name is Marisol Vega," she said. "And I know where your son went that night." Marisol Vega sat at the Whitaker kitchen table, her weathered hands wrapped tightly around a cup of tea she hadn't touched. Emery sat beside her, trying to steady her own breathing, while Beau stood in the corner of the room, arms crossed, eyes locked on the woman who had vanished from Dry Hollow the same year Ben did. "I didn't know what to do," Marisol began, her voice barely above a whisper. "I was just the housekeeper. I wasn't supposed to be involved. But I saw too much." Beau's voice cut through the silence. "Tell me what happened." Marisol took a long breath. "That night, Grayson came home late. Mud on his boots, soaking wet. I heard yelling from the back room. 2 voices. One was his. The other was Ben's." Emery leaned forward. "Ben was at Grayson's house?" Marisol nodded slowly. "He was bleeding. Hurt bad. I saw him, slumped against the wall. I wanted to call someone, but Grayson told me if I said a word, I'd lose everything." Her hands trembled. "So I ran. I left town the next morning." The room felt colder now. Beau's face was stone, but his eyes, red, distant, betrayed the weight settling inside him. "You saw my son, alive, hurt, and you said nothing?" Marisol's eyes filled with tears. "I was afraid, but I never stopped carrying it." She reached into her coat and pulled out an old Polaroid, creased and faded. It showed Ben sitting in the back of a barn, holding Red's reins, a bandage wrapped around his ribs. Grayson stood in the background, turned away. "He kept him hidden for days," she said. Then, one day, they were both gone. Meanwhile, Brielle Navarro met with Cruz Ramirez outside the old Ramirez family cabin. "This is where Silvio used to keep the horse," Cruz said, flashlight in hand. The barn out back was nearly collapsed, but inside they found remnants, old tack, feed buckets, and one rusted nameplate, Redemption. Brielle whispered, "He renamed him." Cruz nodded. He was hiding the horse and the truth. On a nearby shelf, they found a journal, entries written by Silvio. One dated 2 weeks after Ben disappeared. The boy left. Said he couldn't trust anyone. Took the horse, headed south. Back at the Whitaker ranch, Beau sat in silence while Emery held the Polaroid. "He survived," she said softly. "At least for a while." But Beau was already thinking ahead. If Ben had ridden south, where did he go? And why hadn't he come back? As they sat in the quiet, a truck pulled into the drive. Dust swirled in the headlights. The engine cut off. Then came a knock on the door. When Beau opened it, he froze. Standing there, gray-bearded, bruised by time, was Jace Calderon. And in his hand was Ben's wallet. The wallet felt heavier than it should have. Beau Whitaker held it in both hands, the worn leather cracking at the seams. Inside was Ben's driver's license, faded but intact.